I never expected to see my father-in-law at the office. But when I did, everything changed. I was sitting at my desk on a quiet Tuesday morning, sipping my coffee and mentally preparing for the long day ahead. The office buzzed with the usual hum, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, the occasional murmur of conversations. It was a typical workday in our small but growing family business. Nothing unusual. Nothing out of the ordinary. That is, until I heard the unmistakable sound of someone storming down the hallway, their footsteps heavy and quick. I looked up, startled. Nina, my assistant, was standing by the door, frozen in place. Her face went from pale to an ashen shade of white, and I knew something was wrong before I even turned around. Then the door to the conference room flew open, and there he was. Marlon Scott. My husband's father. I couldn't believe my eyes. It wasn't just that he was here, he had never set foot in our office before, it was the way he looked. His face was red with rage, his shoulders tense, fists clenched by his sides. There was a fire in his eyes, the kind of anger I had only seen in fleeting moments over the years. But this was different. This wasn't just some petty complaint or offhand comment. This was something bigger. I felt a knot form in my stomach as I stood up from my desk. No one in the room moved. No one breathed. Marlon had that effect on people. He was a force, intimidating, demanding, and always a little unpredictable. Where is he? Marlon's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Everyone in the room froze. The tension was palpable. I could hear the faint rustling of papers as people pretended to continue working, avoiding eye contact. Marlon's gaze darted around the room, his anger bubbling just beneath the surface. Where is Kyle? I need to talk to him, now, he demanded, his voice rising in volume. I glanced around the room. Kyle wasn't here. He had left for a client meeting earlier that morning. I knew I had to act quickly before things escalated any further. Marlon, calm down, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my hands were trembling. Kyle's in a meeting. What's going on? Marlon turned on me with a snarl, his eyes narrowing. Calm down? Calm down, he repeated, his voice rising even more. I've had enough of this nonsense, and I'm not leaving here until I speak to him. He's ruined everything. Everything I worked for. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. I had never seen him like this before. I had seen him angry, sure, but this was something else. This wasn't just a disagreement over business, it was personal. And I knew, instinctively, that this wasn't going to end well. Marlon turned away from me and started pacing across the room. I can't believe this. I built this company from the ground up, and now look at it. My son, the so-called CEO, can't even make a decent decision without screwing it up. What happened to the business I poured my life into? What happened to the company that made us who we are? I felt a pang of discomfort as his words hit home. I knew things had been tense between Kyle and his father for years. Marlon had always had high expectations for his son, and nothing Kyle did seemed to be enough. He had worked so hard to prove himself in this business, but nothing ever seemed to satisfy his father. But this? This was something else entirely. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. Marlon, please. Let's sit down and talk. You're upset, but you don't need to do this here. But Marlon wasn't interested in talking. He was beyond reason now. He was on a rampage, his words tumbling out faster than he could catch them. You think I don't see what's going on? The budget cuts, the failed product launches, the decisions being made behind my back. I've been around long enough to know when I'm being shoved out of my own company. And it's happening right now. My own son, he's turning his back on me. And for what? So he can play CEO? I felt the room close in around me as his words hung heavy in the air. This was more than just an outburst, it was a warning. A declaration of war. Dad, what the hell is going on? Kyle's voice rang out across the room, and I turned to see him standing in the doorway. His face was pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. He must have heard the commotion from down the hall. Marlon spun around, his face contorted with anger. What's going on? You are what's going on, Kyle. You've ruined everything, and now we're all going to pay for it. Kyle stepped forward, trying to remain calm. Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. Can we just sit down and figure this out? Let's talk about this. But Marlon wasn't interested in talking. He took a few steps forward, his voice rising to a fever pitch. Talk. You've had your chance to talk. I've been patient, but I'm done being patient, Kyle. I'm done. I could see the strain in Kyle's face, the tension in his shoulders as he tried to maintain his composure. He had never been able to win his father's approval, and now, in front of everyone, Marlon was tearing him apart. You think you can run this company better than me? Marlon continued, ignoring Kyle's pleas. You think you can just take over without any consequences? Well, guess what? You're wrong. You've made your bed, Kyle, and now you're going to lie in it. With that, Marlon turned on his heel and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. The echo of his fury hung in the air like a dark cloud, leaving everyone in stunned silence. Kyle stood there for a moment, staring at the door, his hands trembling. I could see the hurt in his eyes, the betrayal that cut deeper than any argument could. He's right, Kyle whispered, almost to himself. I don't know what to do anymore, Emily. I thought I could fix things, but I think I just made it worse. I reached out to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. No, Kyle. You didn't make it worse. But we need to figure this out. Together. My father-in-law's words lingered in the air like poison. I knew I had to get to the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The room was still thick with tension after Marlon stormed out. I stood there beside Kyle, unsure of what to say. The weight of what had just happened was like a physical presence, pressing down on all of us. I could see that Kyle was struggling to keep it together. His hands were shaking, his jaw clenched tightly. I wanted to comfort him, but I knew this wasn't the time. Marlon's outburst had thrown everything into chaos. It wasn't just about the business anymore, it was about family, about the decades of unresolved tension between father and son. For years, Kyle had tried to live up to his father's expectations, but nothing ever seemed to be enough. Marlon's been unpredictable for a while now, I said softly, my voice breaking the silence. But this is something else. Kyle ran a hand through his hair and sat down at the conference table, his elbows resting on his knees. I don't know what's happening, Emily. I've been trying to do everything I can to make him proud. I believed that I was finally gaining some ground here. But now he's just tearing everything apart. I joined him at the table, sitting across from him. I wanted to say something comforting, something to reassure him, but the truth was that I didn't know what was happening either. Marlon's rage had blindsided us both. He's been acting strange for the past few months, Kyle continued, his voice strained. It's like every decision I make, he undermines it. At first, I thought it was just his usual way of trying to control everything, but now it feels different. Like there's something bigger at play here. I nodded, trying to digest everything. Marlon had always been hard to please, but what had just happened felt like more than just frustration with his son's choices. It felt like there was a deeper issue that Kyle had missed, or perhaps, had been too afraid to confront. The longer I sat there, the more questions filled my mind. What could have triggered such an outburst? Was it just the business? Or was there something personal involved? I'm not going to let this go, Kyle, I said, determination creeping into my voice. We need to find out what's really going on. I don't care how deep the rabbit hole goes. If we don't get to the bottom of this now, it's only going to get worse. Kyle glanced up at me, a flicker of hope in his eyes. You're right. We need answers. Before I could respond, the phone on my desk rang, jolting both of us out of our thoughts. I quickly grabbed the receiver. Emily Scott, how can I help you? It was Nina, my assistant. She sounded nervous, her voice wavering. "Mrs. Scott, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think you need to see this." "See what?" I asked, frowning. "There's something strange going on in your father-in-law's office," Nina said. "I just went in to drop off some papers, and I noticed a drawer was slightly open. There's a folder in there, something with your husband's name on it." I felt a chill run down my spine. What could be in that folder? My heart skipped a beat. "Go ahead and take a look. Let me know what you find," I replied quickly, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll call you back in a few minutes," Nina said, hanging up. Kyle turned to me, concern etched across his face. "What was that about?" "Something strange," I muttered. "Nina said she found a folder in Marlon's office, something with your name on it. She thinks it might be important." Kyle's eyes narrowed. "I don't like this. Why would my father have something with my name on it? And why didn't he say anything about it?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. Could this be related to the outburst?
Nina called me back a few minutes later, her voice urgent. "Emily, you're not going to believe this. The folder, it's not just some random paperwork. There's a letter in there. A letter from your father-in-law. But it's dated months ago. And there's more, he's made some notes on the back of it. It's about the company, about decisions Kyle's made, but there's also something about the future of the family." My stomach sank. This was getting deeper than I had anticipated. "Bring it to my office," I said, my voice firm. "Don't touch anything else. Just bring the letter and the folder. We need to figure this out together." I hung up the phone and turned to Kyle. "Nina found a letter. It's dated months ago. Marlon's been planning something, and we need to know what it is." Kyle stood up, pacing the room. "This is insane. I thought I was making the right moves for the company, for our future. But this feels like a trap. What the hell is my father really up to?" I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever was in that letter was important. And if we didn't act fast, we could lose everything. The minutes felt like hours as we waited for Nina to arrive. When she finally walked into the room, she was holding the folder with both hands, as though she was afraid of what it might contain. I took it from her gently, my hand shaking slightly. I opened the folder, scanning the contents quickly before pulling out the letter. It was written in Marlon's familiar, neat handwriting, but it was clear from the tone that this was something personal. "This is it," I said quietly. "This is the moment where everything changes." I unfolded the letter and began reading aloud, my voice steady but filled with dread. "Kyle, I've been watching you for months, and I've come to a conclusion. You're not the man I thought you were. You've made mistakes, big mistakes, and now it's time for me to step in and fix things before it's too late. I've arranged for a few changes in the company, and you'll see them soon enough. Don't think for a second that I've been idle all these years. You've had your chance, now it's mine." I stopped reading, my voice faltering. Kyle was standing across from me, his face drained of color. "What the hell does this mean?" Kyle whispered. "My father, he's been planning something behind my back." "What is he really after?" The letter was a warning. But it wasn't until we confronted him that we realized just how deep the betrayal went. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The letter was clear, precise, and cold. Marlon had been plotting behind Kyle's back, just waiting for the right moment to strike. "I've arranged for a few changes in the company," he'd written. The words echoed in my mind as I folded the letter back into the folder. The pit in my stomach grew deeper. "Do you think he's really going to take over?" I asked Kyle, my voice barely above a whisper. Kyle was standing by the window, staring out at the street below, lost in thought. He ran a hand through his hair, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "It's not just about taking over the company," he said slowly. "It's personal, Marlon. He's always felt like he should control everything. He's never been able to accept that I'm the one in charge now. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, a mix of frustration and helplessness. It was one thing to sabotage someone professionally, but to attack their character, their very identity, that was something else entirely. And yet, this was exactly what Marlon had been doing to Kyle for years. He had built a company and a legacy. And now, as he saw his grip slipping, he was willing to destroy everything in order to regain control. "What are we going to do?" I asked. "We can't just sit back and let him take over." Kyle turned to face me, his eyes dark with determination. "No, we can't. But we need to be smart about this. I don't know exactly what he's planning, but I know it's bigger than just a few decisions. He's trying to destroy me, to make sure I don't have a future in this company. We need to find out everything," I said, my voice firm. "There has to be something more to this letter. If he's been planning behind your back, there has to be a trail we can follow." Kyle nodded. "You're right. Let's start with what we know. He's been undermining me, and now he's making moves behind my back. But what exactly has he been doing? Where has he been getting his power?" The thought of all the years of manipulation, the subtle ways Marlon had undermined Kyle's authority, made my blood boil. Kyle had been working tirelessly, doing everything he could to prove himself as the rightful leader of the company. But his father had been playing a different game entirely, one that was designed to break Kyle. Piece by piece, I reached for the folder again, flipping through the papers. There were no more letters, just financial reports and business plans. But as I scanned one of the pages, something caught my eye, a name I didn't recognize, attached to a series of meetings and transactions. "This doesn't make sense," I muttered. "There's a name here, Alexander Green. He's been in all these meetings with Marlon, but I've never heard of him before." Kyle stepped over, leaning over my shoulder to look at the page. "I don't know that name either," he said, his voice tight. "But whoever he is, he's been involved in some of the most important decisions. And the fact that he's been meeting with Marlon behind my back, that doesn't sit right." We both stared at the name for a moment, the realization sinking in. If Marlon had been aligning himself with someone else, it meant he was preparing for something far more dangerous than we had thought. Could he be trying to take over the company with this guy? I asked. "It's possible," Kyle replied. "But it's not just about the company anymore. This is personal. Marlon wants control over everything: my life, my career, even our family. And I don't think he's going to stop until he has it all." I felt a wave of anger rush through me. I couldn't sit back and let Marlon do this to Kyle. I had to do something that would give us the leverage we needed. "We need to find out who Alexander Green is," I said, standing up. "We need to know everything about him. If Marlon's been working with him, then he might be the key to understanding what Marlon's planning." Kyle stood up, his jaw clenched with determination. "I'm with you. Let's get to the bottom of this." We spent the next few hours digging into Alexander Green's background. We pulled up everything we could find: business records, personal information, and even social media profiles. What we uncovered was both surprising and terrifying. Alexander Green was a businessman with a reputation for being ruthless. He had worked with several companies before, each time leaving behind a trail of financial devastation. He was known for his ability to take over failing businesses. But what was even more alarming was his connection to Marlon. The two had been in talks for months, and it seemed like they were preparing to pull off something big. As we pieced everything together, a sickening realization hit me. Marlon had been planning to sell the company, not to a competitor, but to Alexander Green. And from what we could gather, it seemed like Marlon was positioning himself to stay in control, leaving Kyle out in the cold. "What the hell is he thinking?" Kyle muttered. "He's willing to destroy everything just to make a few extra dollars." My whole life, my whole career means nothing to him. We have to stop this, I said, my voice firm. We need to confront Marlon. We can't let him destroy everything you've worked for. Kyle's eyes darkened with determination. You're right. It's time to face him. We need to do it now, before he makes his next move. We both knew this wasn't going to be easy. Confronting Marlon wasn't just about business. It was about family. And I could feel the weight of the years of resentment and betrayal that had been building up between father and son. But we couldn't back down now. Let's go, Kyle said, taking a deep breath. It's time to put an end to this. The drive to Marlon's house was quiet, almost suffocating. The tension in the air was thick, and I could feel Kyle's unease, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on him. I sat beside him in the car, my thoughts racing. I knew this confrontation would be the turning point. There was no going back after this. Whatever secrets Marlon was hiding, whatever plans he'd been working on, we were about to face them head on. Kyle's knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel. He hadn't spoken much during the drive, lost in his thoughts, trying to prepare for what lay ahead. I knew he was torn between wanting to stand up to his father and the fear of what it might cost him. As we pulled up to Marlon's house, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. It was a grand estate, the kind of place that exuded power, wealth, and authority. Marlon had built it from the ground up, just as he had built the company. I couldn't help but wonder how many years of sacrifice had gone into creating this life, and how easily it was all being destroyed now. Marlon's not going to back down. You know, I said softly, breaking the silence. He's not going to just hand everything over, even if you prove he's been working behind your back. Kyle's jaw tightened. I know. But he can't keep doing this. He can't keep treating me like I'm worthless. Like, I don't deserve any of this. I nodded, understanding the frustration in his voice. For years, Kyle had tried to prove himself to his father, tried to make him proud. But nothing had ever been enough. And now, it felt like the final betrayal had been unleashed. We walked up to the door, and Kyle knocked firmly. There was no turning back now. A few moments later, the door swung open, and there stood Marlon. His face was hard, his expression unreadable, but I could see the flicker of surprise in his eyes when he saw Kyle standing there, flanked by me. What do you want? Marlon's voice was cold, detached, as though he was already prepared for an argument. Kyle didn't waste any time. We need to talk, Dad. Right now. Marlon stepped back, opening the door wider. Fine. Come in. We followed him into the house, the silence between us growing heavier with each step. Marlon led us into his study, a room that seemed to reflect his personality, elegant, meticulous, and utterly imposing. The walls were lined with bookshelves, and a large, dark wooden desk dominated the center of the room. Kyle took a seat across from Marlon, while I stood by the door, unsure of my place in this battle between father and son. I could feel the tension building, the sense that we were on the verge of something that would irrevocably change everything. Marlon didn't waste any time. I assume you're here because of the letter, he said, his voice flat. Kyle's eyes narrowed. The letter, yes. The one you wrote months ago. What the hell is going on, Dad? Why have you been making decisions behind my back? Why are you planning to sell the company out from under me? Marlon leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. He looked at Kyle with a mixture of disdain and something else, something deeper, something old. Do you really think you're ready for this? Marlon's voice was low, almost mocking. Do you think you're ready to run this company? You've made mistake after mistake, and you refuse to see it. I've been trying to guide you, to help you, but you're too proud to listen. Kyle clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. I'm not a child anymore, Dad. I'm the CEO. I've earned my place here. Marlon chuckled bitterly. Earned? You've been handed everything. You think just because you're my son, that makes you entitled to this? To the company, to the money, to everything. I could see the hurt flash across Kyle's face, the words cutting deeper than he wanted to admit. This isn't about entitlement, Dad. This is about respect. I've worked hard for everything I've achieved, and you've tried to tear me down at every turn. Marlon's gaze flicked to me, then back to Kyle. I did it because I knew you weren't ready. You're too emotional. You let your feelings cloud your judgment. And you've made decisions that have hurt this company. But what about you? Kyle shot back, his voice rising. What about all the times you undermined me? You've been plotting behind my back, and you knew what you were doing. Why didn't you just say something? Marlon's face darkened. Because I knew you wouldn't listen. You never listen, Kyle. All I've done is try to protect this company. But I'm not going to stand by and watch it fall apart because you can't handle the pressure. I stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. This isn't about the company, is it? This is about control. You've never wanted to let go of that power, Marlon. And now you're willing to sacrifice everything, your son, your legacy, just to keep it. Marlon's eyes flared with anger, and for a moment, I thought he might lash out. But instead, he sat up straighter in his chair, his eyes cold. You don't understand, Emily. This company is my legacy. Without it, I'm nothing. And if Kyle can't see that, then he doesn't deserve to carry it on. Kyle stood up abruptly, his fists clenched by his sides. You're wrong, Dad. I do deserve it. And I'm not going to let you destroy it. You've been hiding things from me, things I'm just starting to understand. And I'm not going to let you get away with it anymore. Marlon stood up as well, their eyes locking in a tense, charged moment. The anger in the room was palpable, but there was something else too, something buried deep in Marlon's expression. Something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. For a moment, I thought the confrontation would reach its breaking point. But then, in a sudden shift, Marlon broke eye contact, his shoulders slumping slightly. I don't want to destroy you, Kyle, but I need to protect this company. I need to know it's in good hands. Kyle's voice softened, the anger subsiding just enough for him to speak calmly. Then trust me. Let me do this. I'm ready, Dad. I'm ready to carry on what you built. Marlon's eyes flickered with something almost like regret, but it was quickly masked by the same stoic expression he always wore. You'll never understand, he muttered, turning away. That's fine. We'll see if you're really ready. But don't say I didn't warn you. We left Marlon's house that evening feeling like we'd just been through a battlefield. It wasn't a victory, not by any means, but it had been a necessary confrontation. Kyle seemed more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. His shoulders hunched as if the weight of the past years had suddenly come crashing down on him. I could see that, despite the hard words exchanged between father and son, something inside Kyle had shifted. He was finally standing up for himself. But that didn't mean the battle was over, not by a long shot dot as we drove back to the office. I could tell Kyle was lost in thought. The conversation with Marlon hadn't brought closure. It had only raised more questions. Why had Marlon been so adamant about undermining him? Why had he gone behind Kyle's back to meet with Alexander Green, of all people? I don't get it, Kyle said, breaking the silence. We had a small victory today, but I still feel like I'm missing something. I need to know more about Alexander Green. I need to know what he's really after. I nodded. We need to dig deeper. The letter you found, those notes on the back, he's been planning something for months. Kyle, and now we know it's tied to Green. If we can figure out what that connection is, maybe we can finally stop him from making his next move. I can't believe I didn't see it sooner, Kyle muttered. How could I be so blind? He's been manipulating everything from the start. Every time I thought I was in control, he was a step ahead of me. This has been going on for years. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, I said gently. You've been doing the best you could with the cards you were dealt. But now we have a chance to turn the tables. Kyle sighed deeply. I just need to know what he's planning next. If he and Green are working together, then this goes way beyond just business decisions. This is about taking everything I've built. Once we got back to the office, we sat down and started going through every piece of information we had on Alexander Green. The hours passed quickly as we scanned through business deals, financial documents, and even social media profiles. It wasn't until late in the evening that we uncovered something truly unsettling. I think I've found something, I said, leaning in closer to the computer screen. Look at this. Kyle stood behind me, his eyes narrowing as he read the report on the screen. It was a financial statement, nothing too extraordinary at first glance. But as I dug deeper, I found a series of transactions that led back to Alexander Green's companies. He had been funneling money into a series of shell companies, all of them connected to Marlon. It looked like Marlon had been setting up a separate, secretive branch of the business, a branch that Kyle hadn't known about. This doesn't make sense, Kyle said, his voice low with disbelief. Why would he do this? Why keep it hidden from me? Because he's been planning to sell the company out from under you, Kyle, I said, my voice firm. This was never about you not being ready. This was about him keeping control. He didn't want to give you the company, he wanted to take it all for himself. Kyle ran a hand through his hair, pacing back and forth. But why involve Green? What does he have to gain from all of this? What's the real plan? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation. We need to confront Green. He's the missing piece in all of this. If we can find out what he knows, we can stop Marlon from going any further. Kyle nodded, his jaw set with determination. We'll get to the bottom of this, once and for all. We spent the rest of the night organizing everything we had learned. It was clear that Marlon had been operating in the shadows, carefully pulling strings and manipulating people to get what he wanted. But now we had the upper hand. We knew about the shell companies, the secret dealings, and most importantly, the connection to Green Dot the next morning. We contacted a private investigator to look into Alexander Green's background. I knew it was risky, but we needed to move fast. Time was running out, and I could feel the pressure mounting. If we didn't act soon, Marlon and Green might have already secured their plan to take over everything. Hours later, the investigator sent us a report that made my blood run cold. A few things don't add up, the investigator had written. Green has a history of taking over companies, buying them out quietly, using financial leverage to get his way. But there's something more. Green's real aim isn't just business. It's personal. He's been in contact with Marlon for years, and they've been working on something that goes beyond just money. Kyle stared at the report, his eyes wide with shock. What does that mean? What's their connection? The investigator's next line sent a chill down my spine. I found something. Green is connected to your mother, Kyle. He has been for years. I looked at Kyle, my heart racing. Your mother? I whispered, unsure if I had heard him correctly. Kyle's face went pale, his voice shaking as he read the report again. That can't be right. My mother. She died when I was young. There's no way. But there it was, in black and white. Alexander Green had been in contact with Kyle's mother, and there were financial records tying him to her personal accounts, records that went back to before Kyle was even born. Why would Green be involved with her? Kyle asked, his voice strained with confusion. She died when I was a child. There's no way this could be connected to her. I felt my own breath catch in my chest. What if Marlon was involved with her too? What if this whole thing, everything is about something from the past? Something that's been buried for years? Kyle stood up suddenly, his fists clenched. We need to find out, now. The discovery about my mother and Alexander Green was like a bombshell that had exploded without warning. I could feel the room spin as I processed the implications of the investigator's report. What did this mean? How could there be a connection between Green and my mother when she had been dead for so long? I was grasping at straws, trying to connect the dots in a puzzle that seemed designed to break me. Something's not right, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. I don't understand how Green could be connected to her. She's been gone for over 30 years. Emily was right next to me, trying to absorb the same shock I was feeling. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. We need to get to the bottom of this. If Green was involved with your mother and if Marlon's been keeping this from you all these years, it could explain everything. We need to know what he's hiding. I nodded, barely able to form words as my mind reeled. My mother, my dead mother, had somehow become a key figure in this twisted web of business deals, betrayals, and secrets. I had always known that my father wasn't the most forthcoming about our family history, but this was something else entirely. I need to talk to Marlon, I said suddenly, determination hardening my voice. He's the only one who knows the full story. If anyone can explain why this is happening, it's him. Emily hesitated, clearly aware of the risks involved. You're sure about this? After everything that's happened, confronting him again might be dangerous. We don't know what else he's hiding. I don't care anymore, I snapped, surprising even myself with the intensity of my anger. If he's been hiding this from me, I need to know why. I need to know everything. Emily looked at me, her eyes full of concern, but she nodded in agreement. All right, we'll go together. But we need to be careful. Whatever this is, it's not just business anymore. It's personal, Kyle, and I don't think Marlon's going to just give us answers. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation that was coming. My father had already stripped away so much of my dignity and self-respect over the years. But this was different. This was about something much deeper than business. This was about my mother, the woman who had left me too soon, and whose memory I had never truly understood. The next morning we drove to Marlon's house again. This time, there was no pretense of a civil conversation. I was determined to get answers, and nothing was going to stop me. When Marlon answered the door, his eyes narrowed as he saw us standing there. He didn't say a word, but the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. I didn't give him the chance to speak. I know about Alexander Green, I said, my voice hard. I know he's been involved with my mother. I don't know how or why, but I'm going to find out. And I'm going to find out from you, Marlon. For a moment, Marlon didn't respond. His expression didn't shift, but I could see something flicker in his eyes, something I couldn't quite place. Finally, he stepped back, gesturing for us to come inside. You want answers? Fine, he said, his voice sharp. But you're not going to like what you hear. We followed him into his study, the same room where we had confronted him just days before. I could feel the weight of the past pressing down on me, the air heavy with unspoken truths. Marlon sat behind his desk, his hands folded in front of him. Sit down, he said. This is going to be a long conversation. I took a seat, Emily beside me. I could feel the anticipation building as I waited for Marlon to speak. I was prepared for anything at this point, lies, half-truths, manipulations, but I needed to hear it from him. Marlon's voice was steady, though it lacked the usual venom. You've dug up something from the past, Kyle. Something that you're not going to like. I don't care about what I like, Marlon, I said, my patience thinning. I care about the truth. I need to know what happened between you. Green? And my mother. Why is he involved in all of this? What does he have to do with the company? And what's really going on? Marlon's gaze shifted downward, and for the first time in years I saw something that resembled guilt in his eyes. Your mother was different. She was never the typical housewife, Kyle. She had ambition. She had plans. I blinked, not expecting to hear those words. What plans? What are you talking about? She was the one who started talking to Green, Marlon continued, his voice low. I didn't want to get involved. I knew Green had a reputation, but she was persistent. She saw something in him that I didn't. She thought she could take the company in a new direction, one that I wasn't ready for. Wait, Emily interrupted, her voice sharp. Are you saying that my mother, she was part of the plan to take over the company? Marlon nodded, his expression resigned. Yes, she didn't want to just sit by and watch. She saw Green as a way to expand, to make the company even bigger than I ever could. But she didn't tell me everything. She didn't tell me about the deals she was making with him. And she didn't tell me about the future she had in mind. My head was spinning. My mother, who had always seemed so distant and unknowable, had been working with someone like Green. She had wanted to take the company from my father. Why didn't you tell me this? I asked, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Why didn't you tell me any of this? Marlon's face hardened. Because I knew you wouldn't understand. I knew you would think I was the one trying to take everything away from you. But the truth is, I was protecting you. I was protecting you from what your mother wanted to do. I sat there, stunned into silence. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the picture they formed was nothing like what I had imagined. My mother, my own mother, had been willing to betray my father. And all these years, Marlon had kept the truth hidden from me. I need to know more, I said quietly, my voice barely audible. I need to know everything. Marlon hesitated, his eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite read. Then, in a voice almost too quiet to hear, he spoke. There's more. Much more. But are you sure you want to know? I sat in Marlon's study, my mind spinning with the weight of everything he had just revealed. My mother, my own mother, had been involved in plans to change everything about the company, to take control from Marlon and ultimately leave me out of it. The more I thought about it, the more the entire situation felt like a nightmare. Every scrap of stability I thought I had, every ounce of security I believed was mine by right, had just crumbled away. I've done things to protect you. Kyle, Marlon continued, his voice quiet but heavy with years of regret. You weren't ready to understand the truth. I couldn't let you in on everything your mother had planned. She wanted to manipulate the company, and in the end, Green was just a means to an end for her. I clenched my fists at my sides, the anger and betrayal welling up inside me. I had spent my entire life trying to live up to my father's expectations, but all this time, I had been kept in the dark about the very foundation of the family legacy. It wasn't just business, it was personal, and it had always been personal for Marlon. But now, with all this buried history coming to light, I wasn't sure if I could ever trust him again. I don't understand, I said, my voice tight with frustration. You say she wanted to take control of the company, but how? Why? What was she planning with Green? Marlon rubbed his temples as if trying to stave off the weight of the memories. Your mother was different. She didn't want to be the passive spouse. She was brilliant, Kyle. But she didn't have the same vision I did. She saw the company as a way to shape her own future, her own legacy. And Green, he was the tool she thought would get her what she wanted. His words sent a chill through me. Green wasn't just a business partner, he was a pawn, part of a much larger game. Marlon had always been protective of the company, but he hadn't told me how much danger he felt it was in. Green has been part of this from the start, I muttered, more to myself than to Marlon. But my mother, She was using him and using me as part of her plan all along. Not just using you, Marlon said, his voice becoming more strained. She was trying to change the way you saw things. She was trying to shape you into someone who could take over, not just as a CEO, but as someone who could make her vision a reality. But she wasn't patient, Kyle. She wanted to move faster than I was willing to go. I felt my stomach twist in knots. So, you and she were never on the same page. She was planning to push me aside. Marlon looked at me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of true regret in his eyes. I didn't want to admit it, but yes, I didn't think you were ready. You were still too young, too eager to please. Your mother, she saw things differently. And Green, well, he saw an opportunity to take advantage of her ambition. They made deals behind my back. I didn't even know about most of them until it was too late. The room was silent for a long moment. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about the company, had just been shattered. My mother had been a part of this complicated, dangerous web, and Marlon had been playing the role of protector, perhaps too fiercely, perhaps too selfishly. I took a deep breath. So, what's the plan now, Marlon? Are you still going to try to destroy everything I've worked for? Are you still planning to sell the company? Marlon exhaled deeply, his eyes meeting mine with an expression of reluctant surrender. No. I've been working with Green to make sure the company stays intact. But I'm not going to sell it. Not like you think. I've been trying to protect it from both you and your mother's ambitions. But now I see things differently. I stood up, the frustration and anger threatening to burst free. Now you see things differently. You spent years keeping me in the dark. You lied to me about everything, and now you want me to just accept this. Marlon stood up too, his face hardening. I didn't lie to you, Kyle. I protected you. And you may not like it, but you weren't ready to take on the responsibility that came with running this company. You still aren't. I took a step forward, my voice growing louder. That's the problem, isn't it? You never thought I was ready. You've spent my whole life telling me I wasn't good enough, always holding me back. And now you're telling me that I wasn't ready to take control of my company, our company. I could feel the years of pent-up frustration bubbling to the surface. Every moment I had spent trying to please Marlon, every decision I had made to prove myself, felt meaningless now. I was no longer willing to let him define who I was or what I could achieve. No more. I said firmly, I'm done with being your pawn, Marlon. I'm done trying to live up to your expectations. I'm going to make my own path, and I'll do it without you. The silence between us was heavy, as though the air itself was thick with the weight of our confrontation. Marlon stood still, his eyes fixed on me. For a long moment, I thought he might say something to stop me, to offer another piece of wisdom or another chance to compromise. But instead, he simply sighed. You're right about one thing, Kyle, he said quietly. You don't need me. I've spent my whole life trying to control everything, and in the end, I think I've lost more than I ever gained. I met his gaze, my heart heavy with all the unspoken years between us. Maybe it's time we both let go of the past. I turned to leave, my chest tight with a mixture of relief and sadness. I had finally confronted the truth about my family, about the company, and about myself. But the journey wasn't over. There were still decisions to be made. Decisions that would define the future of everything. I had worked for Dot as I stepped out into the night. Emily was there waiting for me, her face full of concern. How did it go? She asked softly. It's over, I replied, my voice quieter than I had intended. That the real fight is just beginning. The days after my confrontation with Marlon were a blur of decisions, phone calls, and sleepless nights. I had finally found the courage to stand up for myself and take control of my future. But with that came a heavy price. The company, which had been both a blessing and a burden for most of my life, now stood at the crossroads of change. Would I truly be able to carry it forward? Or would the weight of my family's history crush me under its expectations? I had told Marlon everything that day. That I would no longer play the role of the obedient son. That I would chart my own course. But the reality was more complicated. My company now, was tied to a legacy I didn't fully understand. And the choices I made would echo through every decision I had yet to make. I spent days going through financial statements, consulting with the board of directors, and meeting with legal teams to ensure the company wasn't being sold off in some quiet corner of a backroom deal. The weight of responsibility was crushing, and I felt the pressure more with each passing day. But amidst the chaos, I found a surprising ally, Emily. She had been my rock throughout this entire ordeal. Not once had she wavered in her support. As I stared at the papers in front of me, overwhelmed by the enormity of the decisions I had to make, I looked up to find her by my side. "I don't know if I can do this," I admitted. My voice heavy with doubt. Emily gave me a reassuring smile. "You already are. You've been doing this all along, you just didn't realize it. Now, you're finally stepping into the role you were meant to have." Her words rang in my ears, and I knew she was right. I had spent my entire life waiting for someone's approval, looking to my father for guidance, always uncertain of my place. But now I was here, and the future was in my hands. I had to trust myself, even if it meant making mistakes along the way. I called a meeting with the board of directors the following week. Marlon didn't attend, he was busy with his own affairs, most likely attempting to lick his wounds after our confrontation. The board was full of skeptical faces, people who had watched me grow up and never quite believed I had what it took to lead. But I wasn't that child anymore. I wasn't the man who had been constantly under his father's shadow. Standing in front of them, I felt something shift inside me. I no longer cared about their doubts or their whispers. I cared about what was right for the company, for the legacy, and for my future. "I'm not here to play politics," I began, my voice steady. "I'm here to make this company what it should have always been, a reflection of what I believe it can be, not a monument to the past." The room fell silent. I could feel the weight of their judgment, but I stood firm. I know I haven't had the easiest path to this moment, but I've learned a lot in the past few weeks. And the most important lesson I've learned is this. The future of this company isn't about clinging to the past. It's about embracing change, taking risks, and growing. If you're willing to work with me toward that goal, then we have a future. If not, then I'll find the people who will. I let my words hang in the air, letting them settle over the room. I wasn't giving them an ultimatum. I was offering them a choice. One by one, the board members nodded, some more reluctantly than others. But they agreed. I was the CEO now, and I had the power to shape the company's future. The following weeks were a whirlwind of restructuring, rebuilding, and reinvention. The changes I made weren't drastic, they didn't need to be. I wasn't here to tear everything down. I was here to build something new on the foundation that Marlon had laid. There were tough decisions, moments of doubt, and yes, some resistance from those who had been loyal to my father. But slowly, steadily, the company began to shift. I even found a way to bring Marlon into the process, though on my terms. He wasn't happy about it at first, and I didn't expect him to be. But we reached an understanding. He could continue to advise, but the final decisions were mine. The company was no longer his legacy alone. It was mine. In the end, the company flourished. My father's vision and my mother's ambition were no longer chains around my neck. Instead, they became lessons, shaping me into the leader I had always been capable of becoming. I didn't have to destroy my family's past to make my own future. I could honor it while creating something new, something that would stand the test of time. And as for Marlon, he eventually came to terms with the changes. He never fully accepted my decisions, but he respected them. For the first time, I felt like he finally saw me for who I truly was, not just his son, but the person I had always needed to become. "Remember, Kyle," Marlon said one evening, after a particularly tense meeting, "you're never going to please everyone. But you've made your choice, and it's yours to live with. Just make sure it's the one you can stand behind." I smiled, realizing that despite everything, despite all the conflict, the betrayal, and the pain, I had finally found my own voice. The company, my legacy, my future, they were all mine to shape. As for the truth, I had learned it the hard way. That now that I had it, I was ready to use it to build something lasting. Something that would stand long after Marlon and I were gone. Because in the end, the legacy wasn't just about the company or the money. It was about the choices we made, the lives we touched, and the people we became. And I was finally ready to face all of that head-on. Author's note: this story is a reminder that family legacies are often more complicated than we realize. It's easy to be caught in the shadow of others' expectations, but the moment you find your own voice and stand firm in your decisions, the future becomes yours. Marlon and Kyle's story shows us that even in the midst of betrayal and loss, redemption can be found when we choose to face the truth, and when we have the courage to let go of the past and move forward.